On December 16th, Russia claimed that it had control over Kupiansk. Russia was lying. The fighting still raged in the city even as Russia claimed that it was all over. But even worse for Russia is that the claim of capture wasn't some premature little victory parade that it was holding for itself. It was such a brazen lie that the precise opposite was actually happening in the city. It wasn't Russia that was advancing, it was Ukraine. And now the momentum in Kupiansk rests with Ukraine's forces. They've just trapped Russian troops in Kupiansk, surrounded and doomed to die. Those soldiers can do nothing but watch as the Ukrainian flag is raised above their heads. Everything started just a few days before Russia made its bold claim about the fall of Kupiansk. The city, which is in the Kharkiv Oblast, had already been in the news just a few days before the claim, and for the opposite reason than the Kremlin claimed. December 12th saw Liberating report a very different situation on the ground. Far from fighting a losing battle, the outlet reported, Ukraine's defense forces had successfully encircled the remnants of Russian invaders in Kupiansk and were in the process of eradicating them from the city altogether. 3 words are important here: search and strike. By December 12th, the 2nd Khartiia Corps of the National Guard reported that the situation had become critical in Kupiansk. That corps reported on the situation in the city in September, and it was starting to look like Vladimir Putin's forces might actually deliver on the claim that Russia would make several months later. Ukraine had a plan for countering Russia's advance, and it was built around the 3 important words we just mentioned. Ukraine formed the Khartiia Search and Strike Group, which was made up of several brigades and regiments, some of which are part of the Khartiia Corps, Liberating reported on December 12th. Among them were the 13th Khartiia Brigade, the 92nd Assault Brigade, and Ukraine's 475th Code 9.2 Assault Regiment. They were joined by members of Ukraine's 144th Mechanized Brigade and the Foreign Legion of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine to create a fighting force with the simple mission of hunting down any Russian soldiers in Kupiansk and destroying. Pulling members out of the Khartiia Corps for this mission was smart on Ukraine's part. As the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA, said way back in January 2025, Khartiia is an extraordinary brigade of volunteer soldiers that was founded by one of Ukraine's richest men, Vsevolod Kozymyako. Putting his money where his mouth is, Kozymyako set about creating a brigade that he believed would serve as a model for the new Ukrainian army, CEPA reports. Radical reform away from the Soviet-era traditions that some in Ukraine's military still clung to was needed, Kozymyako argued, and the Khartiia Brigade's embrace of everything from cutting-edge drone technology to Western training would show the rest of the country how it was supposed to be done. At least that was the plan, and it seems to have worked. The brigade's commitment to using technology in fresh ways was demonstrated when it used ground and air drones in its first entirely robotic assault on Russian positions in November 2024. The surprise attack 20 miles north of Kharkiv caused large Russian casualties without any Ukrainians hurt, CEPA reported back in January 2025, adding, "Airborne drones were used for surveillance and bombing, while small ground vehicles, tracked or wheeled, were equipped with remote-controlled large-caliber machine guns or mines." If all of this sounds familiar, it's because these tactics have been adopted by many other units in Ukraine's army. Successes like these were what made members of the Khartiia Brigade the perfect choice for Ukraine's counterattack in Kupiansk. The Search and Strike Group was created to eliminate a Russian breakthrough north of Kupiansk, with its ultimate goal being to surround the slowly advancing Russians, thus cutting them off from supplies and colleagues so they would end up trapped and helpless. Between October and November of 2025, the group set about its work. During those months, the Khartiia Brigade, along with the others that we mentioned earlier, set about destroying several of Russia's assault units and battalions. Units from Russia's 121st and 122nd Motorized Rifle Regiments fell to the search and strike strategy, Liberating reports. So too did units from Russia's 68th Motorized Rifle Division, its 30th Engineer Regiment, and its 27th Motorized Rifle Brigade. The support that these brigades and units had been receiving from Russia's 7th Regiment of Unmanned Troops and UAV, or Unmanned Aerial Vehicles, units amounted to naught. One by one, the Russian soldiers fell. Search and Strike was doing precisely what it was designed to do. It wasn't long before Ukraine's forces achieved a breakthrough in the direction of the Oskil River north of Kupiansk. That breakthrough was vital for what was to come, as achieving it allowed Ukraine to block all of Russia's ground routes into Kupiansk. No longer would Russia be able to send fresh troops and supplies to its soldiers that had already crossed the river. The forces that Russia had in the Kupiansk direction would have to be enough. Spoiler alert, they weren't. With the Oskil River under control, the search and strike groups, along with other units of Ukraine's armed forces, could focus on eradicating the rest of the Russian occupiers in the Kupiansk direction. The 13th Khartiia Brigade itself completely liberated the village of Radkivka, in addition to clearing the surrounding forests of Russian occupiers. That same brigade also continued operating in the north of Kupiansk, where Russia had achieved its breakthrough into the city. Several dozen houses were encircled and cleared of Russian forces that had infiltrated, but were now devoid of the backup that they expected from their comrades. The other units that were part of the search and strike group also enjoyed plenty of success. The 475th Code 9.2 Assault Regiment, we mentioned earlier, managed to liberate the village of Kindrashivka, along with its surroundings and the woodland around the village. They were given a helping hand by Ukraine's 4th Battalion of the 92nd Brigade in another operation designed to prevent Russia from achieving its own encirclement of Kupiansk. Between September 22nd and December 12th, units of the Khartiia group alone killed 1,027 Russian soldiers, and it's not like they were the only group operating in the Kupiansk direction. Militani adds that the 125th Separate Heavy Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine's Armed Forces, also known as the Skala Regiment, was working with other units to clear regions inside and around Kupiansk. Skala managed to free the Liberating district of Kupiansk at around the same time as the search and strike groups were doing their work. That work included clearing high-rise buildings where the Russian invaders had set up camp. In some cases, Skala used explosives to collapse those buildings, trapping the invading Russians in the rubble, leaving them doomed to painful death. More would come. However, we tell you all of this for a reason. Everything that we just described happened in the months leading up to Russia's claim that it had captured Kupiansk. Anybody paying even a modicum of attention to what was really happening on the ground would have seen that for the transparent lie that it was. It was very clear that Ukraine was making all of the positive moves in Kupiansk, even up to the day of Russia's announcement. How positive was Ukraine's actual position in Kupiansk? On December 17th, the day after Russia claimed the city's capture, AA published a report revealing that Ukraine had claimed to have retaken 90% of Kupiansk. Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrsky even took to Telegram to refute Russia's claims and reveal what Ukraine's forces had actually achieved in the city. Speaking in the wake of his participation in the 32nd annual meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, held at Germany's Ramstein Air Base, Syrsky gave specific examples of successful operations of the Ukrainian armed forces. He added, "Thanks to active search and strike operations, we managed to push back the occupiers from Kupiansk and take control of almost 90% of the city's territory." Ukraine's Kupiansk liberation mission was almost complete. By January 4th, The Gaze was reporting on comments made by Ukraine that only small pockets of Russian forces remained in Kupiansk, and that those pockets were being eradicated. Russia still controlled the city's council building, which offered Putin the tiny sliver of credibility he needed to continue claiming that Russia had captured Kupiansk. However, Russia's hold on that building wasn't going to last for much longer, as Ukraine still had control over the positions that it occupied near the Oskil River. The spokesman of Ukraine's Joint Forces Group, Viktor Trugubov, spoke to Suspilna, and he gave a damning assessment of Russia's real situation in Kupiansk. There are still some isolated enemy soldiers there, but they are completely surrounded. They are already having serious problems even with getting any supplies, even by airlift, because we can just see where everything is being dropped. I would say that this is the final phase of clearing the city, and in principle, even some Russian media figures are quietly admitting this, Trugubov claimed on January 3rd. He also estimated that Russia may have fewer than 100 soldiers operating in the city, and that those soldiers apparently had a deadline of February to capture Kupiansk. Hold on a second, a deadline of February. How could that exist if Russia was already claiming control over Kupiansk? It couldn't, of course, as Russia was watching its lies unravel around it. That unraveling would be completed just a few days after Trugubov made his comments. Trapped in the wake of Ukraine's brilliant search and strike strategy, the Russian soldiers that remained in the vicinity of the Kupiansk City Council building could only wait as their enemies and Ukraine's liberators closed in around them. On January 13th, the New Voice of Ukraine reported on the trap being closed. The outlet reported that the Khartiia Brigade had published a statement on Telegram the day before, announcing that the city council building to which Russia was clinging to give credibility to its claims of Kupiansk's fall was back in Ukraine's hands. Khartiia has established control over the Kupiansk City Council building. The Khartiia Search and Strike Group and the Kupiansk Tactical Group are completing the clearance of the city, which was successfully unblocked during a successful operation led by the command of the 2nd National Guard Corps, the announcement blared. Ukraine had done it again. Using brilliant planning and coordinated strikes against Russia's forces in Kupiansk, Ukraine had eradicated the majority of the Russian presence in and around the city in just a handful of months. A situation that seemed so dire when the Khartiia Brigade was deployed had been completely reversed. Far from being captured, Kupiansk was liberated to such an overwhelming extent that Ukraine was once again able to fly its own flag over the city. And as it so often does, Ukraine didn't just make a claim, it proved it. The Khartiia Brigade's announcement was accompanied by a 2-minute video that documented how Ukraine's soldiers fought through the streets of Kupiansk to reach the city council building and raise their flag. We get just the briefest of glimpses into Ukraine's tactics in this video. We see urban combat being conducted, presumably by the search and strike groups formed months prior to retaking Kupiansk. Footage from inside command centers is seen, showcasing how everything that Ukraine has just pulled off was the result of a collaborative effort between several of its units. Forces on the ground appear to communicate with this command center, leading to the deployment of drones that deliver their explosive payloads to positions where Russian soldiers have entrenched themselves. The fighting is brutal, visceral, but we see the result right at the end of the video. Footage shot from above shows Ukraine's flag installed on the city council building and blowing in the wind. That one shot destroys Russia's claims of the fall of Kupiansk, but there is still work left for Ukraine to do. How much work depends on who you listen to. Earlier we mentioned Ukraine's claims to have retaken almost 90% of Kupiansk in the wake of Russia's claim that it controlled the city. While it was certainly true that Ukraine had made impressive gains by mid-December, the claim that 90% of the city is under Ukraine's control might not be entirely true. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which reported on data from the mapping project Deep State that purports to show the true situation of the city. According to that data, as of January 11th, a large part of Kupiansk does indeed rest in Ukraine's full control. However, there is a larger part that sits in what Deep State calls the grey zone. This is a term that the Battlefield Tracking Organization uses to denote regions that aren't under either side's direct control. Often, fighting is ongoing in those regions, or if one side does have control, that control is difficult to determine through independent analysis. There are still parts of Kupiansk that Russia controls, though the situation in those regions isn't looking good for the meager numbers of soldiers stationed in them. Those soldiers are all encircled by Ukraine's forces, and they're cut off from supplies and reinforcements. They may not have fallen yet, but they'll go down to Ukraine soon enough unless Russia manages to pull off something drastic in the direction of the Oskil River that allows Putin's forces to reopen supply channels. A couple of caveats need to be mentioned when it comes to this deep state data. First, the data upon which Euromaidan Press reports comes from January 11th, which is right around the time when the Khartiia Brigade announced the liberation of the Kupiansk City Council building. It's unclear if the liberation of that building has been accounted for in Deep State's data because of the second caveat. Changes on the Deep State maps tend to occur with a delay. So it's possible that some of the Russian troops the resource reports as being encircled have since been eliminated, and it's also possible that some of the grey zones may not be so grey anymore. And with less than 100 Russian soldiers reportedly left in Kupiansk, it very much seems that it's a case of when and not if Ukraine will retake control of the entire city. One thing is for certain, Russia's claims that Kupiansk had fallen were about as accurate as Putin's 2014 claims that Russia would capture Kyiv in 2 weeks if he gave the order. That may have been the case back in 2014, but it certainly isn't the case now, as fewer than 100 Russian soldiers trapped in Kupiansk waiting for Ukraine to take them out or capture them can attest. As positive as all of this Kupiansk news is for Ukraine, it can't afford to rest on its laurels. Russia still wants, some would even say needs, to take the city. We saw evidence of that on January 11th, around the same time that Ukraine's forces were taking over Kupiansk's city council building. UKR Inform reports that 200 combat engagements took place between Russian and Ukrainian forces on January 11th, and some of those engagements were carried out in the Kupiansk direction. In the Kupiansk sector, the enemy made 9 attempts to advance toward Petropavlivka, Novoplatonivka, Kupiansk, and Bohuslavka, the outlet reported. So, while there is an ever-decreasing number of Russian soldiers in Kupiansk itself, Russia still has forces on the city's outskirts that are launching assaults. These forces can't be allowed to make any advances if Ukraine is to maintain its positive momentum in Kupiansk and the wider region of Kharkiv. Russia also won't stop pushing for Kupiansk, even if its push has been severely weakened. As Euromaidan Press reported back in February 2024, Kupiansk is a major Russian target. The data in this report tells us that the city has been in Putin's sights for almost 2 years now. There are several reasons why, though the main one seems to be that the city is home to a key railway hub that Russia believes it can use to support its attempts to capture Donetsk and Luhansk. Collectively, these two regions make up the Donbass, which Putin has repeatedly said that Ukraine needs to cede to Russia if there is to be any hope of a Ukraine war peace deal. Taking the Donbass out of the question, the capture of Kupiansk would allow Russia to provide support to its flanks in the Kharkiv region, thus improving its attempts to encircle the city of Kharkiv. All of these potential strategic benefits mean that Kupiansk will remain a target for Russia's assaults, even if those assaults aren't necessarily conducted on the ground. As the Kyiv Independent pointed out in September 2025, Russia has targeted Kupiansk with guided bombs, artillery, first-person view drones, and multiple launch rocket systems for many months now. Some of those attacking options have been weakened by Ukraine's search and strike groups, taking out the Russian units conducting them. However, Russia still holds some positions near Kupiansk, perhaps enabling artillery and rocket strikes. And the only way that Ukraine will stop the guided bombs is by taking out the aircraft stationed in airfields inside Russia and occupied Ukraine, which requires the use of long-range munitions. Still, Russia's remaining soldiers in Kupiansk won't care about any of that. What they will care about is that they are encircled, and it's only a matter of time before Ukraine sniffs them out. When that happens, those trapped Russian soldiers will hope that Ukraine forgets about the strike portion of search and strike and instead replaces strike with surrender with tails tucked between legs. What the situation in Kupiansk really shows us is that Russia has developed a knack for making false claims about its success in Ukraine, even as evidence from the battlefield proves that Russia is lying. But these types of lies can only last so long. Something big just broke in Russia, and it has the potential to end Putin. Here's a hint. It's about Russia's manpower and about how Ukraine is shredding through the Russian military. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more up-to-date reports about the situation on the ground in Ukraine. And thank you for watching.